Thanks, Axel. And thank you all for sticking around late afternoon to listen to me talk about a topic that most of us don't really like to deal with very much, which is failure. A couple commitments up front. First of all, over the next half an hour or so, I am not going to try and get you to love failing, because none of us do. In fact, I'll talk a little bit about some of the psychological baggage that comes with failure. But what I do want to do is to give you some examples and to give you a framework that will help you better process failure and understand it and turn it into a tool that can help you drive innovation and growth and more engaged employees and teams. And I have a little bit of a confession to make because I get compliments on this. I wrote this book with my UC Berkeley colleague, John Danner. It's like, oh, what a cool title. You must have started out to write a book just based on the title. Actually, no. It was the furthest from my mind when we started. I run startups. I teach people how to do startups. I do corporate startups. I invest in startups. This was all about innovation and growth and optimism. And as I kind of unpacked 4 or 5 years ago when we wrote the book, what we do in Silicon Valley, we took a look at this and said, there's a lot of failure here. 80% of our startups fail. Yet we create more value in this little area than anywhere else. So why is that? So I took some of these concepts, and if you ever want a little humility, take some of your own ideas, gather some of the smartest grad students you can find, and throw them out there and see what they do with them. So that's what I did with some of these concepts around failure and innovation and drawing some linkages, and experimented with that a few times, and out of it started to come a framework. And that's the essence of what I want to share with you today, at least at a high level, along with some examples on how to become what I call a more failure-savvy leader. And the thing that's interesting about this, as we dive into the topic, is we start out being pretty good about all of these things, about learning from failure. As kids, we're told, learn from your mistakes, learn from your failures. Now, this is what's great. If things don't work up here, it's kind of demonstrating the point, right? I'll try it one more time. Click. There we are. The good thing about this guy is he picked himself up, dusted himself off, and got back on the bike. And all of us as kids did that. And sooner or later, click. There we go. We get on the bike and we learn how to ride. And as adults, some of us do this pretty well too. Like this guy. Jeff Bezos of Amazon understands the role of failure and experimentation in creating great value. Jeff Bezos and I kind of have a similar approach to this. I have an innovation equation, and for me it goes something like this. In order to innovate, you have to try new things. Whenever you try new things, some will work and some won't. The more innovation you want, the more new things you need to try, or the bigger new things you need to try. Therefore, the more innovation you want, the more failure you have to be willing to accept as a dancing partner to go with innovation. It's just part of that math. And in fact, Bezos has really distilled it down to this comment: given a 10% chance of 100 times payoff, you should take that bet every time. And he has, right? He's failed at a lot of his ventures, but take a look at how he's become the richest man in the world. But not all of us are so good at this. Every week, we read something new about Boeing, for example. And we say they should be doing better at this. After the second crash, they finally grounded the jets, and we see no new orders. Maybe I can swap. Perfect. Thanks. We see their market cap deteriorating. It's actually 50 or 55 billion now. We learn that there were issues they detected 2 years ago, a year before the very first crash. And of course, this was a bad week for Boeing as they're being grilled in front of Congress. Why is this? Why didn't Boeing have a map to help them understand how to navigate this a little bit better? Well, that's the whole idea behind the essence of our book, behind the other F word, how smart leaders, teams, and entrepreneurs put failure to work, is to give you a map, to give you a roadmap, to give you a cycle on how to reduce the damage of failure before it happens, how to react properly in the moment, and then once it does happen, how to extract the value from it. Failure is a regrettable event, right? We don't like it. But when you have a failure, you've paid a lot for it. You've paid a lot in capital, you've paid a lot in personal capital, you've paid a lot in brand equity. Whatever that cost is, you might as well extract the resources from it. So how is it that we do that? Mark Randall, when he was out earlier today, was talking about the importance of failing fast just so you don't continue to invest heavily in those ventures that may not yield results. Well, the key thing is what comes out of those failures that you can put to work in your next venture. If you listen to any earnings call from a Fortune 500 CEO, you're going to hear three things pretty consistently. We're driving growth through all of the innovation that our really engaged team is driving. Sounds pretty familiar, right? I'm going to start, as we unpack this, at the end of this, with the engaged employees at kind of an interesting place. Somewhat early in the process of doing the research and writing this book, I spent some time with China Gorman, who's the CEO or was the CEO of the Great Place to Work Institute. And I know a lot of your firms are on these lists of great places to work. And she was really interested in this research. So I asked her why. And then I asked her, even more so, if she could distill down to a single word what makes for a great place to work. What would that be? And instead of the things that you might normally think about that would be respect or teamwork or a great workplace or whatever, she said this. She said trust. And then I understood why she was so interested in all of this, because she said trust up and down the organization, trust across the organization, because when you have a crisis, when you have a failure, you create trust. When everything's going great, you don't really create trust, but when your team comes together, we've all had those moments. When your team comes together around a crisis and comes through at the other end, you're battle-hardened, right? You've been through that together, and you know who you can trust, and that helps contribute to a great place to work and employees who have one another's backs. So I want to share a few numbers, make us all a little bit smarter about failure. Now, I come from the San Francisco Bay Area. We have a pretty good basketball team there, the Golden State Warriors, and perhaps the best pure basketball shooter of all time. But even Steph Curry misses more shots than he makes. Anybody here in the IT business? 2 out of 3 of your major IT business projects probably aren't on time, on budget, on spec, whatever else. Startups. 7 out of 10 of them at least die in the first 18 months. And worse, those who go on to get venture capital, the cream of those, the 1 in 100, 75%, 3 out of 4 don't even return the amount of money that they receive from their investors. Anybody here do New Year's resolutions? How's that working for you? That's why we get to use them again and again. By the way, next year, tell a few friends, chances are you have a better shot of success. Peer pressure. We're here for new product introductions, new services. Yet most studies show that up to 95% of them fail to deliver on their pre-launch projections. And here's one for me, and I own a few patents that's somewhat troubling. 99%, these are US numbers, of patents don't actually make money. Now, there are other reasons, and we all know that, for us to have patents, our portfolio, offensive, defensive, whatever, but just the pure economics are challenging on that. I said I would talk a little bit about psychology. I'm going to talk just a little bit right now. So why is this topic of failure? Why does it have such a heavy weight on the way that we approach and think about things? And it's this memory and fear cycle that we have. When we think back around failures, we actually sometimes have a bit of a physical reaction. We kind of curl up in the fetal position a little bit if we think of those really embarrassing moments. I know some of you just went there. But we don't want to repeat those. So we have a fear of failure. So what does that mean when we talk about taking risks? It means we're not going to take those risks because we don't want to fail. And it becomes a really difficult cycle. So one of the things that I do when I'm working, especially with large organizations, and they say, I know there are better ideas inside my company, inside my executives, where are they? I ask this question. What would you do, you personally, what ideas would you bring forward, what initiatives would you launch if you were certain it would not or could not fail? Or maybe more realistically, that there was no CLM attached to it, career limiting move. And then what happens is people take the pet projects that they were just afraid they would get ridiculed over, or they said, look, this only has a 10% chance of success, and then they start to bring them out into the light of day. And having done this a number of times, some of them actually get greenlit. And a lot of them fail, but the ones that do succeed are the ones that create that 10x, that 20x that we want. Researching this book, I interviewed CEOs of hundreds of companies, small startups, mid-sized companies, global enterprises, astronauts where failure is not a good thing, producers of Broadway theatrical productions, which fail all the time. So we got insights from this from a number of perspectives. I want to share with you a couple of failures that resulted in long-term success. The first is a small startup called Bourbon. A few years ago, it was a series of apps on your phone. Social media, e-commerce, mobile gaming, a little photography. And the team was backed by Andreessen Horowitz and other top VCs. And they went out to their beta testers, and after a month, they said, what do you guys think? And the beta testers and their early customers said, meh, not so good. Because we all can choose whatever we want. We have 100 apps on our phone. Why would I choose your little walled garden? So they were about to shut the whole thing down, but fortunately they heard this one positive ping, this one signal through all the negative noise. And that signal was, we do like that little photo app. And it's a good thing they listened to the signal and launched the product because that little photo app was Instagram. And not too long thereafter, a couple of quick funding rounds later, Facebook buys them for $1 billion plus. It's now a big multiple of that. Team of 13 people. So not a bad day at the office for that $1 billion transaction. Listening for that signal through the noise. Now that's a kind of a classic Silicon Valley pivot. Sometimes, though, you need to persevere. You want to rivet. You say, I'm onto something, whether it's R&D, whether it's, I just need to persevere. And I want to go back a long way for a story around this. Now, in the United States, we have this product. You guys have it globally, right? You guys have 39? Do you guys have 40? Let me tell you the story of WD-40. It started way back in the 1950s at the Rocket Chemical Company. And Rocket Chemical Company was a lubricants and coating business that had just gotten a contract with Lockheed Martin to create an anti-rust protectant. And the way that you create anti-rust protectants is do what? You have to keep water from getting in. So the way you do that is you create a water displacement formula. So they went to work and they created water displacement formula number 1. Didn't do what they wanted. Water displacement formula number 2, WD3, WD4, all the way up until they got to number 40. And formula 40 was the magic formula that's remained largely unchanged until today, WD-40. Anybody know what the magic ingredient is? I'll bet you do. Is fish oil. The magic ingredient in WD-40 is fish oil. So if you smell WD-40, right, think about it. You know it smells different. That's the fish oil. And my friends who like to fish, they do 2 things. They spray it on their fishing tackle to keep it from rusting, and they spray it on the hooks because they say the fish loves it. An innovation that was unintended. I've got a few to-dos sprinkled in here. One of them is don't always think like an MBA. Now, I teach at the Haas School of Business, so sometimes my higher-ups shudder at that. But think about other disciplines, like the ones that we just went through with the rocket chemical company. Think about engineering, which has failure analysis. You try to fail to build better products. Think about the creative process, writing, music, film, rough drafts, failures along the way. And like WD-40, think about the scientific method. Think about ongoing experiments. If you change the language, you change the stigma attached with having your hypothesis disproved. Thomas Edison famously said, "Now I know 10,000 ways a light bulb won't work." Right? It's changing the language and the lexicon. So here's our failure value cycle. 3 general areas. Beforehand, they all start with the letter R. 1, respect that failure happens a lot. Number 2, rehearse for those failures, especially the ones that will happen a lot or the ones that may be existential, that may threaten your business. Number 3, put in place early warning signals so that you can catch those failures early and recognize them. But if you miss that, or if a failure happens, number 4, during the failure, what do you need to do to react quickly and stop the bleeding so that you go into your post-failure mode? But before you clean it up, pause to reflect what the learnings are that are inherent in that failure. And then you put them to work in number 6, your rebound strategy. And then, remember. Wouldn't it be cool if you walked into the rocket chemical company, which is actually still independent, it's now the WD-40 company, and there was a case with WD-1 all the way through WD-40? 50 years later, what would that tell you about the culture of the company? Things like that, really important. So here are a few examples. Number 1, respect that failure happens a lot. Google respects that failure happens a lot. Google is brutal in the way they'll pull back products. I was walking around the displays this morning, and I came across in the Museum of Failure a description and an example of Google Glass. Google Glass pulled it back. Google Plus, that was their second or third failure in social networks. They also had Orchid in South America and elsewhere. So Google will pull it back. But more than that, Google's not Google anymore. Why is that? Because Google understands that at some point, their core business model, that is one of the most efficient cash-generating machines ever, is no longer going to be relevant. Somebody might disrupt that. So what are they doing? They're reinvesting in a portfolio of new opportunities, from space exploration to medical devices to self-driving cars and more. Right? So they understand corporate strategy that their core business might fail. Number 2, rehearse for your failures. I did not want 7 stages. I wanted 5. I thought 5 was better. One hand, right? We all like that. So I started to cut failure cycle steps out. But a friend of mine, a colleague of mine at UC Berkeley, who used to fly jets off aircraft carriers, said, hey, you cannot get rid of rehearse, because I spent 100 hours in the simulator for every hour in the cockpit. And that's why I'm still here today. They must have killed me 50 times, but I'm better as a result of that. Businesses should think like that, not just military, sports teams, and surgical teams. Businesses should rehearse for failure. So we left it in. One of the things, here's another to do. Think about your business as a portfolio of failure zones. Now, there are going to be places that are no-fail zones. This morning, I was speaking with some folks from a pharmaceutical company here. You cannot have failure on the manufacturing line of a pharmaceutical company or a nuclear power plant. But when it comes to that pharmaceutical company and you want to drive growth, you better have some failures in your marketing strategy and your branding and try new things. So if you say we can't have failure in our business anywhere, then what you're going to do is you're going to limit yourself to slow decline and death. So experiment in those other areas. The last big example I want to use is going to cover several of these stages. And it's Netflix, which actually created this self-inflicted, nearly fatal failure on itself. In the United States, when Netflix launched, it was DVDs by mail. We didn't have streaming. And after about a dozen years, Netflix started streaming, and it realized that these businesses were different. And in a brilliant move, it said, wait, instead of you having one account where you get DVDs by mail and streaming, we're now going to give you 2 accounts, 2 credit cards, 2 queues, 2 everything, and we're going to charge you more for both of them. That's a great idea, right? So what happened to the customers? You can see what happened to the share price. The share price dropped 75% in a matter of months. Customers were leaving all over the place. So what does Netflix do at that point? Well, the CEO of Netflix comes on and actually records a video in the back of their campus. And I'm just going to play the first 15 or 20 seconds for you of what he sent out to all of his subscribers.
Hi, I'm Reed Hastings, CEO and co-founder of Netflix.
I'm Andy Rundich, and I head up DVD operations at Netflix.
We've been working for the past 14 years to build Netflix year by year into the best possible service we could build. We're making this video today to apologize in person, or at least on camera, for something that we did recently.
So he went on to apologize, and on and on and on, as they did. Did it make a difference? It did, somewhat surprisingly. He said, we're sorry, we'll fix it. We're not sure yet what we're going to do, but we'll fix it. So they reflected on what happened before they fixed it. First thing they did is they got rid of Quickster. The second thing they did is they said, why was it so easy for everybody to leave us? We thought we had loyal customers. And they go, oh, we have nothing original. So they started investing in original content. Last year in 2018, they spent more than any Hollywood studio on original content. How's that worked out for Netflix? Pretty good. They almost killed themselves, but they took the time to figure out what the lesson was from that. And then finally, how do you remember your failures? Everybody here has some failures along the way. Do you share them? Jeffrey Bucas, the CEO of Time Warner, wrote the foreword to my book. And when I spoke with him about it, I said, wow, I'm surprised you're going to write the foreword. I didn't actually know him. And he said, look, we almost killed the company. Does anybody remember AOL Time Warner? He said, we actually have to sit around and remember these things so we don't make the same mistakes. So sometimes it's the stories you tell, or the words you use, or new procedures you put in place, or relics like WD1 through 39. Bezos understands this. In the lobby of Amazon is a cave bear skeleton. Bezos bought that on the very first day that he launched Amazon auctions to compete with eBay, because we're going to take out eBay. You know, Bezos is still the most feared CEO in the world. Nobody wants to compete with Bezos, right? Amazon auctions failed. So Bezos put it out there as a reminder that even the CEO, because this was his idea, can make mistakes, and we're going to learn from them. By the way, what did Amazon learn from Amazon auctions? Oh, maybe we can create an Amazon marketplace, which drives phenomenal value, and they wouldn't have had the insights if they hadn't launched Amazon auctions, figured out what worked and what didn't work. Here's your to-do. What do you do when you think about your failures? Are you okay to share your failures with others? Because if you share those stories, your employees are going to start to say, oh, well, I have an idea, even though I'm afraid it may not work, right? Because they know that you've created an environment for them that will allow these ideas to at least have a chance at success. So there's our failure value cycle. Let me see if I think I did this. Yeah. What would Boeing do had they processed all of this through rehearsing for such an event? Recognize it early, reacting the moment something goes wrong. Had they processed it using this cycle, maybe they wouldn't be in the challenging situation they're in right now. If you're interested to see how you rank on all this, if you go to the otherfwordbook.com, there's a report card, and you can grade yourself. By the way, don't go to the otherfword.com. That's something else altogether. Otherfwordbook.com. And if you want a little bit more, some more examples, some hands-on, a conversation or two around it, I've got a session on Thursday morning, I think it's around 11 o'clock or so, where we'll be taking this failure value cycle and diving in a little bit deeper and getting our hands a little bit dirty on that. So my last thought for you on this is, remember, failure is today's lesson for tomorrow. Use that, take advantage of that. And that's what I have. Do we have time for a question or two? A quick question, if there are any. This is a topic people don't like to talk about. I know, I said that up front. All right, then let's move on. Thank you for your time today. I'll see you around. If anybody wants to talk, by the way, I'm here through Thursday midday. Thank you.